Okay. All right, everyone. I think we can get started now. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Cybersecurity Threats Along the Path to Recovery. My name is Terry Bendel, Director of Sales and Marketing at Appalachia Technologies, and I'll be hosting today's session. Before we begin, a few housekeeping and logistics. So you all know attendees are automatically muted when you join the meeting. If you have questions, you can use the Q&A feature during the webinar, and we'll get your questions at the end. The slides and recording will be available after the webinar. They're going to edit it to make sure that I look wonderful, so give them some time. It'll take some work. And then we'll be posting the speaker contact information in the chat group. So for today's webinar, I'm sure that many of you have been on a multitude of webinars around the coronavirus pandemic. But today, we're going to focus on the path to recovery. At the beginning of the pandemic, many businesses had to rush into a remote workforce configuration. But the return to the office is something that can be planned for in a more organized and orderly manner. So this webinar will help you prepare now to ensure that necessary processes and tools are in place for this to happen. So we'll start with current threats and managing risk as businesses reopen. We'll talk about a layered cybersecurity approach to protecting your business. Then we'll have a panel discussion and open Q&A. But I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker is John Sancenito, President of Information Network Associates, an international investigative and corporate consulting firm headquartered in Harrisburg. INA specializes in providing risk management, security consulting, and intelligence services to high-risk industries around the world. More than 20% of Fortune 100 companies engage INA services. John is a retired police detective and a former county detective with the Cumberland County, Pennsylvania District Attorney's Office Criminal Investigation Division. Say that 3 times fast. Next, we'll have Brandon Keath, Cybersecurity Practice Lead for Appalachia Technologies, a leading cybersecurity and managed IT service provider based in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. With prior experience in both private and public sector IT, Brandon has served in various cybersecurity roles over the past 12 years, specializing in ethical hacking, cybersecurity strategy, regulatory compliance, and cyber defense. Brandon is active in the cybersecurity community, founder of PA Hackers and co-founder of B-Sides Harrisburg, as well as an adjunct instructor at Harrisburg University and the University of Phoenix. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker. John, over to you.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today, and thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar. We are very grateful to have this opportunity to speak with all of you. As we come out of this pandemic, a lot of businesses are going to struggle with many aspects of reopening their businesses. And coronavirus is only one part of it. There are many things to consider as our offices begin to reopen. You know, it is hard to imagine anything in our lifetime that relates to the amount of social and political and in office changes that all of us have seen since the coronavirus went into effect. It has not only affected our economic lives, it has affected our lifestyles, our views on our government, our social behavior, our mental well-being, and also our cybersecurity attack vector has increased dramatically as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can control some of the risks to your organization as you begin to reopen. So they say that 85% of people reported washing their hands more frequently or using hand sanitizer more frequently since this crisis began. 61% reported following social distancing standards since this began, and 22% started stockpiling essentials like food and water, and probably toilet paper and paper towels too, since they seem to be hard to come by. And also, 82% of remote workers reported that they no longer reportedly and regularly wear pants while going to work. So you all know who I'm talking about because you're out there probably in sweatpants right now. So as time goes on, there are many changes that are yet to come, and there are many things that are still yet to take place and changes that are going to occur in our workforces. So COVID-19 created a remote workforce. Many of us had not worked from home very regularly before this time period. And if we did, usually it was done very sporadically with a VPN access. And usually they were individuals who were higher positions within the organization. So many employees started working from home that never did before. There was no check of their home IT security environment in most cases. Most of them were thrust into a role of working from home without any real checks on what their home networks look like. Many, in some cases, users were forced to use personal computers because companies simply did not have enough laptops or were not equipped for this rapid change and rapid rollout of employees working from home. In many cases, software updates were unenforced, so they either lost the ability to be able to push software updates to the computers, or the IT person was not able to make rounds to computers in order to update software on them. So a lot of unpatched software still exists because of the workforce working remotely. Employees also took confidential information outside the office place, and in some cases, that's usually in violation of existing written policies against PII and other personal information being taken out of the office place. They probably took it home for the first time in light of the push to get workers working remotely. Most had no former cybersecurity training and have not had any cybersecurity training while working remotely either. So that has created a lot of attack vectors. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad guys out there that are looking for these opportunities and using this as an opportunity to attack workers as they're working remotely. But now we'll move into the next phase of this whole pandemic, and workers are coming and going from the office. They may be splitting their time between the office and the workplace. Computers are being plugged into networks, sometimes for the first time in months, potentially initiating software updates, but also potentially uploading information to the networks that they were previously connected to. IT practices are inconsistent with written policies. Oftentimes, the policies that companies had in place went out the window when people started working remotely. So now companies have to work to try and rectify and be able to bring those policies, written policies, into compliance with their actual practices. And also, a lot of people had bad habits and bad cyber hygiene while working remotely. No one was looking over their shoulders. Very easy to use a work computer to do things that they shouldn't be doing. So there's all kinds of bad habits and bad things that people got in the habit of doing. Also, a lot of times people may become less suspicious of clicking on email attachments because so many more files were being transferred to and from computers via the use of email and other methods. So they may have worked up some bad habits as well while they were working remotely. You know, there's an awful lot of online scams out there, everything from fake coronavirus maps to bogus mobile device apps, and especially phishing emails, which we're going to talk a lot more about later, ransomware, doxware, which doxware is really just holding information hostage. So you may be familiar with ransomware. Doxware is a newer version of ransomware in which not only does it encrypt the data that's on the devices, but before it encrypts it, it also exports some of that data out. So they may have exported files, they may have exported your email, they may have exported your other online activity. And what they're doing now is saying that if you do not pay the ransom, they will release that information publicly and embarrass you because of it. So if you're an individual who may have been using their personal email on their computer, they threaten to release your personal email publicly if in fact you don't pay the ransom. So it's not just enough to be able to have your data backed up to prevent a normal ransomware attack. This new attack vectors are actually exporting data and then encrypting your data. So they're forcing you to pay the ransomware, or they're going to make the information public. And also social engineering calls have increased as well. People calling individuals pretending to be from the IT department from their company, pretending to be higher ranking people within the company, getting them to divulge confidential information, getting them to trying to get them to divulge their passwords or other login information or share sensitive information that they're not entitled to. So humans cause the most data breaches. They say that 90% of data breaches are caused by human error, not cyber attacks. So most of the time it is people leaving the back door open, failing to take proper protocols to protect the data that's on their devices, simply not locking down the machines properly, using weak or non-existent passwords or using default passwords. Those are all means in which people open the door for cyber criminals to attack machines. 34% of all breaches in 2018 were caused by insiders. So those were individuals within the organization itself that caused the breach. They may not have had malicious intent, but 34% of those incidents were caused by someone inside the organization. And only 20% of businesses have had their staff trained in cybersecurity in the past year. So only 20% of companies out there have taken the time to actually educate their people on cybersecurity protocols. And in the light of the fact that everybody pushed they pushed their workforce out to work remotely, that's a very staggering statistic that may come back to haunt them. So insider threats are individuals within the organization that create vulnerability. It's not always malicious. They're not always people like foreign operatives who attempt to penetrate a company to be able to steal trade secrets, although in some cases that is the case. But most of the vulnerabilities are created from ignorance, not malicious intent. They simply either were never trained very well, or they chose to ignore those practices and do something that was contradictory to the way they were trained. Most of the time, people don't think anything bad's going to happen. They don't think that it applies to them. They don't feel that security is their responsibility. It's of the IT department, and they just do not practice the standards that are put in place. So it's very important that as companies come back online, that they retrain their employees and continuously train their employees on cybersecurity issues. Let's face it, most people are going to choose convenience over security. It is just human nature to do so. And most companies do not train their employees properly. As you saw, 80% of companies are not training their employees on cybersecurity. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about the dark web, because that is really where most people's data is being bought and sold on a daily basis. And most people are completely ignorant that their data may be for sale on the dark web. So the dark web isn't really an alternate internet. It is just a part of the internet that is only accessible through special software, allowing users and website operators to remain anonymous and untraceable. Law enforcement has been trying to get their hands around things on the dark web for a long time, but unfortunately, it is very difficult for them to track people in these stores, if you will, that operate on the dark web. And I thought most people don't have insight into this, so I would explain a little bit more about what the dark web is. In order to access the dark web, you have to use a browser that is specifically allows you to access those websites which are part of the Onion network, and you need something like a Tor browser. There are some other browsers as well, but Tor is the most common browser. If you're going to access the dark web, you need a particular browser. You're not going to be able to get to the dark web through Internet Explorer or Firefox or one of those types of browsers. You need to have a specific browser like Tor. The dark web addresses do not end with things like .net, .org, .gov. They all end with .onion instead of the normal common extensions that we're familiar with. And most of the things are done on that platform, so they all end in .onion. The anonymity of the dark web attracts criminal elements, and I'm going to show you some examples of just how illicit the dark web really can be, and how things are bought and sold on the dark web that you only would think about in a Tom Clancy novel. Compromised data is also stolen here. So when people commit data breaches, they sell that information on the dark web. And when they breach your computer, they're likely to sell information that they glean from that on the dark web as well. So when you go to one of the dark websites, and this is one called Apollon, it's just a marketplace on the dark web. Apollon is just one particular marketplace. There are many. Most people are familiar with Silk Road, which was actually shut down a while back, or at least most of it was. There are some variations of it that are still out there. So once you go to the dark web, and usually the dark web is, you have to know where you're trying to get to before you get there. So it's not indexed like Google and other things, although there are some indexing of the dark web that does occur. You kind of have to know where you're trying to get to in order to go there. And what you're trying to do, if you're a bad guy, is you're going out to one of these illicit marketplaces like Apollon just being one of them. On the Apollon website, here's some screenshots that were just captured this week. They actually break them into categories where if you're looking to commit fraud, there are 5,000 different postings on that sector. Some of them are broken down to accounts and bank drops. Some of them are credit card information. Some of them are other dumps from data breaches, personal identifying scans, and other things are out there as well. There's also areas where you can get fake IDs, fake phone bills or other bills, or other kind of fake platforms, counterfeit types of things. You can buy drugs, and if you name the drug, you can buy it on the dark web. This is actually saying that there are over 12,500 cannabis sites. There are 7,800 stimulant sites. You can buy ecstasy and mushrooms. I'm sorry, there's no one selling mushrooms currently on this particular platform. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, Henry. You can buy steroids, you can buy all kinds of different prescription drugs on the dark web. This is the marketplace where a lot of that illegal activity occurs. You can also buy software on the dark web, software that allows you to commit ransomware attacks. You can buy malware platforms so that you don't need to be a computer programmer. All you need to do is go to the dark web and pay for software that was written by a computer programmer, and then you can kick off your own attacks. And it really is a scary place out there. There is all kinds of bad things going on out there. You can also even paying other people to be able to hack websites and crack passwords and do other things out there, social engineers and so forth. So if you want it, you can go out there. They even have murder for hire advertisements out in the dark web. I got to wonder how many of them might be law enforcement or are monitored by law enforcement. However, there literally are platforms in which you can actually go and hire a hitman on the dark web. So here's a couple of examples that were pulled. The one on the left is an Iowa driver's license that was put up as an individual trying to show what kind of data he had. It was actually a color scan of the individual's driver's license. We placed the black boxes over here to help protect this individual's identity, but literally his driver's license number, his date of birth, his home address, and everything was posted on this particular posting. And you see these kind of data dumps that are out there. Many of them sometimes are even copies of people's passports. They're copies of people's driver's licenses. Basically, someone hacked a database where that information or scans of that material was stored. So it could be a travel agent's website. It could be other things out there in which people hacked into a website where this information was, and then they're selling it on the dark web. You can even see in these cases they're listing the number of times it was sold, and also, you know, this particular individual's identity was sold 58 times. You also can see other information about when the buyer was there and how trusted that buyer or seller is. I'm sorry, the seller, how trusted that seller is. So you know that, you know, how reliable they are based on rater reviews, just like you would on Yelp. So there's all kinds of methods out there for them to even grade the quality of information they've purchased from that particular seller and the feedback that's been provided. And then also here's costing on there. All of the transactions on the dark web are done through a cryptocurrency type of format, usually through Bitcoin. On the other thing here, this is a database which is also listing what kind of information is out there, and includes information on dates of birth, email addresses, geographic information, all kinds of information about that particular individual, including even physical addresses and other things. So these are dumps of data that people can buy and sell on the dark web. This is another data dump. Just put this one up here because it also includes even the security codes on the back of the credit cards. It includes all kinds of different kinds of credit cards, including the individual's social security number, date of birth, banking information, and also full information about those individuals are out there. And these kind of things are all over the dark web. Literally, there are thousands of these kind of things bought and sold in the dark web all the time. So how do you know if your information is on the dark web? There are a couple of different ways that you can do that, to do a dark web scan. One of the websites that's actually available for free is a website called Have I Been Pwned? And to be pwned actually means that your security has been compromised on an online account. So there are many references to this out there. The actual origin of the word pwned actually is in somewhat dispute according to hackers, but one of the popular theories is that it came from the online game Warcraft. And a programmer, while they were typing in code for Warcraft, when someone gets defeated in Warcraft, it comes up and says, you have been owned. Well, they misspelled owned as pwned, and that became part of the code, and then that compromised status actually was relayed and is used oftentimes to say that your security has been compromised, or that you've been bought and sold and that you are owned by someone else. So that's a very common thing that occurs out there. So if you go to this website, and this is a website that is actually posed by an internet blogger, a white hatter, who actually compiles information that's available on the dark web and some of the data breaches, and actually lets people know whether or not they've been compromised. I'll show some screenshots of what that looks like here in the next couple of slides. So if you go to the Have I Been Pwned website, you'll get something like this. You do not put in a lot of personal information, but what you do put in is just your email address. So if you put in your email address, it'll then come up and tell you whether or not your data has been compromised. And this is just showing that there are over 9 billion pwned accounts out there, and 112,000 pastes, which is information from different data breaches that was actually made available, potentially those individuals from a particular state or a geographic region or whatever the case may be, and also account information that's out there. So all of these were data breaches that have occurred and are included in the Have I Been Pwned websites. It's a little disturbing when you go there and you find that your information has been compromised in 3 or 4 different data breaches that you may not have ever been aware that your information was compromised for. What you can also do is entering in your email address on the website will actually notify you of whether or not your particular email address becomes the victim of future data breaches as well. You can even go in there and put in your company domain in here. So if your company is XYZ company and all of your email extensions end in xyz.com, you can then put that xyz.com into here, and it'll tell you if any of the coworkers or other email addresses on that domain have been compromised or are in the database as well. And likewise, you can sign up for future notifications of your particular domain as well. So these are some of the samples of some of the websites in which information is available on this website. The Adobe data breach, when it occurred in 2013, was the largest one up till that time. Has been eclipsed many times since then for the number of records that were stolen. But in 2015, Comcast had a data breach, and in 2016, LinkedIn had a data breach, and all of that information is out there, and likely you're going to find that your information was compromised and is out there. Your email address was compromised in one of these data breaches. So most of the time, people's information, when it's compromised, gets used to commit identity theft. But sometimes what they're going to do is they're going to determine that people typically use the same password for multiple accounts. So if your information has been compromised in some online app that you downloaded for free and used a password to access that app, the bad guys know that most people use the same password. So what they're likely to do is to go and go to Amazon and put in your email address and use the same password that you used with that online app, and then try and compromise and see if they can get into your account that way to make purchases on your Amazon account. Or likewise, even your financial institution, if they can figure out which bank you operate from, once they have a password, they're going to reuse it, because most people use the same password or slight variations thereof. So that's why it is very important. Password length matters. It's really important that you have a longer password. I put out an example over here on the right where we actually talk about if you have a 6-character password, which is all letters and all lowercase, such as Corona, we have software that'll crack that in 11 minutes. And that software is easily available for purchase out in the dark web. If you actually change one of those to a capital letter, it's going to take us our software about 11 hours in order to crack that password. If you put in both a uppercase and lowercase letters and also one number, it would take 19 days. But simply, if you added an extra couple of characters to it, 9 characters, put in a special character, such as, and this one has 2 special characters, an exclamation point and the @ or hashtag, that information would take 44,000 years in order to crack that password. So that's why it is very important that you follow those standards and that you not use the same password. Because even if you have a password like this that can't be cracked through software, just simply by using that same password in multiple sites puts you at risk. So make sure that you're very careful on how you use your software password, or how you use your passwords, and make sure that you choose unique passwords for every site that you go on. I realize that that is not an easy thing to do. Luckily enough, there are password management software platforms or apps out there that can help you with that. I've listed a couple of them here: LastPass, Dashlane, RoboForm, and Keeper. Those are some of the more popular ones, but there are numerous password managers out there. If you have a plugin to your browser, they'll actually be able to enter the information for you when you go to those websites, or you can actually look it up on there depending on the level of access that you have. Many of them have free versions with limited access, but I'm always cautious of free software, free apps. I think that most of the time you get what you pay for, but that's a small investment to make in order to be able to protect your identity online. And the first place that we go to look for passwords is we turn the keyboard over, then we turn the mouse pad over, we turn the mouse over. So many people have their passwords taped to the bottom of those things. Make sure you're not one of them. And you all know who I'm talking about, so if it's you, please remove it by the end of the webinar. And just a couple of tips for remote access. Require a VPN and use a VPN also yourself. If you're going through Wi-Fi networks or public Wi-Fi, make sure that you actually use VPN access. Make sure that you use 2-factor authentication. Make sure that your home Wi-Fi networks have been changed from the default password to something else, and make sure that your employees are as well. If you're managing other people, that really needs to occur. Make sure that antivirus software is up to date. Make sure that the data is being backed up to something that is not live while it's on the network. So that way, if you do download ransomware, you're not infecting your backup copies. Make sure that you train your employees on cybersecurity. I can't stress that enough. Some of the physical security considerations: there's a lot of offices that have been closed and are unoccupied, and you can have the best cybersecurity in the world, but if somebody kicks in the door of your building and then kicks in the door of your IT room and takes the server physically with them, they're going to have an awful lot of data unless you've taken proper precautions to encrypt that data. And so make sure that you also include physical security considerations when you're looking at security. Also check your insurance coverage to make sure that you have the proper coverage for remote users, and also if for unoccupied buildings. Many people are surprised to hear that their insurance company will not cover them if their building has not been continuously occupied for certain periods of time. Make sure that you do intrusion testing and also fire detection systems. Many of those systems were not used for a while before this pandemic. So you may find that your fire detection system doesn't work or your intrusion detection doesn't work. And now that people are slowly coming back into the office, make sure that you actually have a working system in there to protect your employees, and also make sure that they're familiar with how to arm the system as well. Certainly, there's a lot of other things on here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just keep in mind that physical security needs to be part of what you're doing on a daily basis when it comes to those. To cybersecurity has a physical component. So laptop theft, approximately 7% of laptops are stolen before their end of useful life. So 7% of laptops are actually stolen. And with so many people relying on laptops as they're carrying information back and forth from home and work, that's a lot of compromised data. Laptop costs more companies more than 3.5 million annually because of theft. And usually that's in notifying customers of their data being compromised, and having to, in the case of a data breach, which occurs a lot of times, that can cost companies a lot of money just to have one particular laptop stolen. The average impact of a laptop costs $49,000 on an average whenever a laptop is stolen. So of the $48 billion lost from the US economy as a result of data breaches, 28% of it resulted were recovered or available because of stolen laptops or other portable devices. So don't underestimate the value of that machine. The top 10 places where laptop thefts occur, most of you are probably not in public schools, but public schools is number 1, but residential properties is right behind it as number 2. Automobiles, and most of the time, this is automobiles where people put their laptop they leave it in their backpack, they stop at a bar to get a drink on their way home, and somebody smashes out a window and takes it, or they forget to lock their car and it gets stolen out of there. Businesses and offices, number 4. But restaurants and cafes, most of the time it's people being careless with their backpacks or their computer bags. Hotels and motels is certainly a commonplace, but also airports and public transportation like taxis and buses and so forth. The next user to that taxi is likely to walk with your laptop if you leave it in the back. So some practical considerations for you as users is make sure that you keep up to date with software patches, that you install antivirus and keep it updated, that you use unique passwords, that you're using a VPN, and that is included on your mobile devices, particularly when you're connected to unsecure networks, that you use two-factor authentication, that you are sure before you click on email attachments. Don't forget about physical security, and use whole disk encryption on your devices as well. So, here's some things to consider. If your employees can't tell the difference between a phishing email and a regular email, they're putting the organization at risk. If they're not aware of what constitutes protected data, they're putting the organization at risk. If they're not sure of the consequences on clicking on a suspicious link, or they're willing to plug in a USB drive that they find in the parking lot, or they don't know what to do, these are all behaviors that put an organization at risk. And I would venture to say that all of us know at least one coworker that would do these things on a regular basis. And that's maybe time to take a look and see if you can get that person some advanced cybersecurity training. So in summary, make sure that all your computers are updated and patched. Set standards for remote users, and as people come back and forth, is a good time to do audits of their home security networks to make sure that their Wi-Fi passwords are actually moved off of the default passwords, and that they are password protected. Make sure that they have locking filing cabinets in order to store PII at home, and that other things are in place. Educate your employees. Take steps to protect your unoccupied buildings. Know where to go to get assistance. Have a business and personal plan for managing this crisis. This goes for both your personal protection as well as that of the business. And here are some government resources to know if you are the victim of a cybercrime. You should report it to the IC3. which is an internet crimes site that's a public and government partnership in order to track cyber crimes. There's some other sources on here as well as useful links. Both the FEMA website and the ready.gov business website have business continuity plans that you can download for your organization as well. So there's my information. You have any questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Brandon and let Brandon take the next step of the webinar.
All right, thank you so much, John. That was a fantastic presentation. In this section of the presentation, we're going to just reiterate for a moment what it means bringing the remote workforce back. What are some things that we need to consider as we start to try and get more towards a new normal, so to speak? What are some of the new threats we're seeing due to COVID-19, and how can we mitigate some of those threats? And what is a layered security strategy and why do we need it? We'll talk a little bit about how do you detect threats in an organization and what are some of the common tools that organizations are using to figure out that they have or have been breached, either through a phishing email or some other means. And then we'll wrap up with some additional guidance for security awareness training and simulated phishing. When we talk about bringing the remote workforce back, as John iterated, it is incredibly important for us to make sure operating system patch levels are up to date. Many organizations are finding that due to people using home devices or not being able to connect to their corporate networks, a lot of individuals are missing those corporate operating system patches. Most breaches outside of phishing occur because there isn't a proper Windows or Mac or whatever device patch on the device. It is incredibly important to ensure that those patches are up to date. Along with that, it's important to make sure that antivirus and anti-malware is also up to date on those devices. We want to make sure we're using good antivirus, as not every antivirus is the same. They do have different detection rates. If you're not getting at least 99.99% detection rate, it may be time to look for a different solution. And we're recommending most people do a full antivirus scan on all your employees' computers because you're just not sure with it being at home what may have been downloaded or accessed, or if the device may already be compromised. And as John said, because passwords can leak from a variety of different platforms, many people remember when LinkedIn was hacked, Yahoo was hacked, all of those passwords are out there, especially if you've used the same password in multiple places. It's possible your password is out there. It's possible that your password has been hacked during this quarantine. It's a good idea to make sure all employees change passwords and even force that if necessary. And running a dark web scan. There's a lot of information out there being sold online. These guys are absolutely criminals. They're the same people selling drugs. They're not nice people. And they're going to do whatever they can to sell your information or through identity theft, steal as much from your business as they possibly can. It's important to make sure you're using sites like Have I Been Pwned or even more sophisticated services to check if your company's information is out there. And as we get back to work, we want to look at our bring your own device policies. Did our implementation of bring your own device, if we had a policy, did it work the way we thought it was going to work? And if it didn't, what can we do to improve it? We know there's likely going to be a resurgence of this later in the year. It makes sense for us to be prepared and look at our policies and procedures, what worked and what didn't. And of course, DLP policies as well, data loss prevention. For a lot of people out there, you may not know if your companies, if your employees working from home, if they downloaded your company's data onto their devices. Many people don't know that Office 365, that many organizations are using come with a variety of DLP tools and policies that you can put in place to track when employees are downloading different documents to their personal computer. I encourage everyone to, if you don't have a data loss prevention policy in place, to create one and look at some of those features you may even already have in Office 365 and how you can take advantage of them. Criminals are targeting remote workers. The FBI says there is a 300 to 400% increase in reports to the FBI from all of the attacks. They're hitting people's emotions during this pandemic. It's important to remember that they're going to use things such as fake stimulus or SBA loan emails to try and invoke that emotion. We want to be careful that our employees aren't necessarily clicking on these emails or downloading things unnecessarily because it's that emotional trigger. This is something we need to be aware of as we're returning to the workforce. And we want to take a layered security approach, a strategy when we're talking about cybersecurity. Just like when we have a house, we may have a door, we may have locks on that door, but no matter how many locks we have on that door, if a tank comes through our house, that door isn't going to protect us. In the same respect, we want to put lots of layers of defense in our organization. So even though we can never be 100% protected, we know that we will be a good amount protected or within a 99 percentile protected. And that starts with physical security, employee training and defense, firewall and antivirus, system patching and encryption, and backup solutions, of course, because if something goes wrong, you want to have a backup, but also threat detection is incredibly important. You want to know when someone has either hacked or is inside your system. On average, it takes an organization 6 months to discover that they have been breached. In today's environment, that is just unacceptable. What are ways that we can overcome this? Often for our security team, we use a product or a software of what we call a SIM, or a Security Incident and Event Management System. Now, what exactly does that mean? What is a SIM? Well, if you've ever gone to a doctor's office or even visiting a professional office, you may notice that they often will have you sign in. They have a certain date of what time you got there and what your business was, and you sign out. In a similar vein, every computer system, every time you open up a Word document, send an email, or do anything on your computer system, your computer actually creates a log of that action, hence the name of the log file or event. What a SIM does is it correlates all those events together and allows us to baseline and find out when something is off or something is odd. This increases our efficiency when we're investigating things. Why was Bob on Saturday night at 2 a.m. accessing the accounting files? That might be legitimate, but it might not be. And these are the things that when systems are breached and data is being stolen, that we want to detect. It allows you to prevent those potential breaches, and it reduces the impact of those security events. If you can correlate them together and you can stop a breach before it happens, it can save an organization, even if they've suffered a phishing attack, even if they've failed that first step. This added layer of defense can stop it. And you also get a good understanding of your environment. You begin to learn, or your IT team learns, what are the things that you're doing in your environment, what is normal and what is abnormal. Knowing what's normal in your environment goes a long way to knowing when someone may be interfering with your systems. And of course, compliance. There's a lot of compliance frameworks that are requiring SIMs and other services like it as you're protecting your data. Now, the SIM that we use at Appalachia is called Alien Vault. And as you can see, there is a lot of events just from today in this demo, over 2,000 and 8,000 for the week. It's not uncommon in a company for there to be hundreds of thousands of logs or even billions of logs a month, depending on how many systems or services they have. As we scroll down, you can see there's a lot of information that's populated. This is the same information that our analysts are working from. You can see what Windows devices you have, Android, iPhone, Linux, Mac, what devices you have on the network, and potentially what new vulnerabilities were discovered on those devices that could be taken advantage of. Now up here we have things categorized in a way of this detected something odd, something that it thinks is a system compromise. Our analysts go in and investigate these findings. And we can take a look, if we were investigating this one, a ransomware incident, we can open this up and look at this. It looks like it's something tried to connect in from Germany, and it's detecting this kind of ransomware. It gives some information on this and some strategy and recommendations for what to do. Now, this could be a false positive. It's not always legitimate. That's why it's important to have good trained engineers when we're discussing this, because if someone is not quite sure what they're looking at, it may be difficult to tell when you're actually getting attacked and when it is just something in your environment that's specifically set up that way. Now, say this is ransomware. Maybe we want to take some action. Our responders will then go in and they may shut down the system. Maybe if it's critical, maybe if they can't shut down the system, we want to get some basic forensic info. We want to get some other system information. Our analysts can. But what will often happen is our analysts will add this to an investigation. So we'll take this and we will open it up and create a new investigation. Now over in our investigations tab, you can see a ton of different investigations open in this demo, but the main idea is it provides a place to collaborate amongst the different security analysts and gather evidence and data. This creates a trail so that we can discover if the organization is potentially been breached. These hackers that break into the organization tend to be pretty smart, and they hide amongst all the data you have. They want to look like they're a normal person in your organization. By gathering this evidence, we can figure out if that's really true, or if this is actually a malicious user that's inside your organization, potentially trying to steal your money, steal your data, or do something else nefarious. And we can attach all kinds of things. You can see some of the evidence that's attached to this one, as well as when the different activity for the alarm. Now, another thing we want to look at is we can categorize things via the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Now, the MITRE ATT&CK framework is a way to categorize the way that cyber criminals attempt to break into organizations. If we think of drive-by compromise, that means when someone visits a website, it's how they get compromised. Someone may visit a website and it has some type of malware on that website that is able to compromise your computer. It might be spear phishing, where you click on a link, or it may be just valid credentials in your organization. Maybe they got it off the dark web. This allows us within our SIM to categorize and figure out ways that people are either attempting or have broken into an organization. If we're seeing a lot of spear phishing, but we're catching it in our later layers of defense, maybe we need some additional phishing training for our employees. If it's valid accounts, maybe we need a stronger password policy. This can give us some excellent objective information to go on when trying to improve the defense of an organization. And at this time, I'm going to kick it back over to Terry, who's going to talk to us about phishing. and training.
All right, thank you, Brandon. So let me share my screen back out. Okay. All right, so thank you. As Brandon mentioned, and as well as John, phishing is still the #1 cause in data breaches. So, you know, really security awareness training is important because your employees are the first line of defense or they're the weakest link. And the more security layers that you have in place, the better. So if you can train your employees, that's just an additional layer. And I know that you've heard a lot about, you know, the different phishing scams that are out there, but we want to show you some to give you some tools to actually learn how to identify a potential phishing email. So in this example from American Express, it's targeting the COVID-19 relief stimulus, which is something that, you know, is very relevant in today's world. They're typically done in such a manner that is very convincing. It's not this, I'm a prince and I have gold for you type message anymore. They look legit. There are a few things that you can look for. If the email address is exposed, you can see here, for example, this should say that it's from something at americanexpress.com, but instead it's delivery-15765. So that's suspicious. This doesn't always show. So what you may need to do is hover over the email name that it's coming from to expose this information. Another clue, a little less obvious, is that it says hello valued member. And typically this would be customized with your information. And finally, there's a link. So always be suspicious of links. If you hover over this, you can actually expose the link that you're going to. And this is bringing you to Google Docs, which is likely not something that American Express would use to advise you about your stimulus. Another email regarding just a heads up about the COVID-19 in your area. This email looks a little bit more legit. It looks like it says it's from cdc.gov, but a very minor detail, if you look at the sender's address, it's cdc-gov.org. So that's a concern. Also, they can make these links look any way they want, but behind the scenes, if you hover over the link again, you could see where it's actually going. So in this example, it's not specifically around COVID, but I think it's a good example because it's playing again on the emotion and the fear. And this is saying that Chase is letting me know that there's some concerning transactions on my account. So again, you can look at the email address. There's not my name, so that's a concern. But in any case, when you're getting something like this that has a link, if you do in fact have a Chase account, what we recommend is close this email out, go to your web browser and go to your Chase account, or go on your mobile if you have the app and sign in that way. Don't use the link, sign into the app natively. This also is for like if you get a LinkedIn message. Everybody likes making new connections. You get an email, awesome, someone wants to connect with me. Don't click the link in the email, go to LinkedIn, go to your app and look for that new connection there. So now what we'd like to do is actually show you how you can leverage tools to help train your users. So once you've done the training, how do you know if they're working? At Appalachia, we use a tool, a platform that does simulated phishing. And when you do that, when you install this, you get a new button in your Outlook toolbar, and it says Catch Phish. So here's an email example that I have that I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is legit, so I'm going to record it to see if this is a legit email or not. So when you click Catch Phish, it's going to alert me that this is a possible phishing alert. And if you scroll down, I can actually send this for analysis. When I do that, the system will actually highlight some things that I could look at to determine whether this is an actual legit email or a phishing email. So if I'm not sure, either your IT department or your managed service provider could evaluate this and advise. In this example, I have another one here. And in this example, when I report that I'm not sure if this is legit, you can see that this was actually a simulated phishing email that my company sent. So you get a congratulations. It supports employee engagement, which helps the employees take it more serious. You can also see in this demo site that my score is not so good. So I need to do a better job of either taking the training or being more vigilant when I'm looking at the emails to know whether, to determine whether or not they're legit. From a manager's perspective, you can take a look at your organization with this tool to see how you're doing. So overall, this organization is not doing so well. And I can specifically look at my users to determine, do I have employees that are at higher risk than others? And I can address those either with supplemental training or potentially with disciplinary action if they're simply not participating or taking it serious. But all of these things are put in place to just help your organization continue to get better and stay safe. Okay, and so that's our demo on the phishing and training. And now we have a few minutes left to talk, to do a panel discussion. I know we have a few questions and we'll see what we can get to. So one of the questions that we have here is, what if there's a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic? What are some things that organizations should be doing? Brandon, did you want to take this one first?
Absolutely. It's, as we talked about previously, it is incredibly important to have a business continuity plan. You want to make sure that you're prepared for the next wave of a disaster. It's imperative for our business that we're able to adapt to different changes and that we put things in place. So if we know this can happen once, it can happen again. So if you haven't updated your business continuity plan or looked at it in a while, or if things didn't go quite as well as you wanted it to, it's time to revise it and adjust it accordingly.
Thank you, Brandon. John, did you have some things to add to that?
I think that, this has all shown us just how unprepared most organizations were for an actual emergency, especially one that evolves rapidly. And I think that we all need to really take to heart all the lessons learned from this incident, and go back and revise our emergency plans so that we're prepared for the next one. And then the next one may be a pandemic, it may be something else. I can be sure that in some sort of or another, we have not seen the end of COVID-19, even though companies are opening up again. The government will force a shutdown again if cases spike. So, I think organizations have to be able to catch their breath, but also then review their disaster plans and prepare for what if there's another shutdown in 4 weeks? What if there's another shutdown in the fall? Whatever that looks like, now's a good opportunity to catch up to your new reality and be able to roll this out, but only if you learn the lessons from what's going on right now and what's going right and what's going wrong for your organizations.
All right, thank you. Another question, how do you verify that employees who are working remotely are exercising good controls and working safely? John, did you want to take that one?
Sure. There's some certain software that you can put into place and logs that you can check to see what your employees are actually doing. I think that most of the time, though, it's good management of employees, making sure that you're checking in with them often. And then I think also you have to think about auditing your employees. You have to think about actually having a home security checklist, which we're going to provide some information about that. But make sure that actually someone from the IT department or someone in management is going over that checklist with the employee, either by taking a look and accessing their computer remotely, or by going to their home, or just by talking through and working through some of these issues with them. As a condition from working from home, they need to have certain things in place to help protect the data that they're entrusted with.
All right, excellent, thank you. Well, we are right at 2 o'clock, so we have any other questions that come in. What we can do is include that information as a follow-up to this webinar. As far as closing out next steps for organizations to help you through this, first of all, there's a lot of information to consider, but know that you're not in this alone. We are here to help. This webinar will be available and the slides will be provided via email as a follow-up. We also will have the resources John mentioned. We have a return to work checklist, and we also have a BCP ebook. It'll talk about a very high level approach to a business continuity plan and how you can build on that and evaluate what worked well and what you can do to improve it for a future time that hopefully we don't need, but it's better to plan and be safe. And finally, reach out for advice if you need assistance with any of this or have questions. You can reach all of us. Here's some information on contact information to reach out to either INA or Appalachia for help. And we were really happy to have you here today. Thank you for taking some time out. We hope that you got some useful information. And again, reach out if you need anything. Hope you have a good rest of the day, and thank you.